So today we're going to be focusing on two aspects of assessing writing. Okay, so I'm going to focus on those two aspects. The first one is what to assess. So you guys will need to know what to assess. And then the second one is how to assess. Okay, so if we try to relate the idea of assessing writing with the nature of assessment, as a language teacher, you guys will need to know what to assess. That's the first one. So what to assess about writing. And then the second thing that you need to know after you have identified what to assess about writing, the second thing that you need to determine is how to assess, right? So once you have what to assess, then you need to decide how to assess the writing, the aspect of the writing that you have selected. And we're going to discuss them one by one in details in this Zoom session. So if you have any questions, just open your microphone and your webcam perhaps, and speak out your questions. I'm going to try to answer them if I can answer them. If not, then yeah, I'm going to try to look for some sources on the internet and let you know later on. Yeah. All right. So what to assess and how to assess. Now, let's talk about what to assess first. You might still remember about our topics in assessing reading last week. So in assessing reading, we have several types of reading passages, right? There are several types of reading passages. There are actually three types of reading passages, right? And it's actually the same as in writing. Why is it the same? Because reading and writing are actually two sides of the same coin, right? So it means that we're talking about the same product here. We're talking about the same product. So that's why when we refer back to the assessing reading, we have the same types of reading passages if we compare it to the types of writing. Okay, so those three types are, of course, we have personal writing, we have job related writing, and we have academic writing. Okay, so we have personal writing, job related writing, and academic writing. I've explained about them in the previous topic, right? So personal writing, you might imagine things like letters, messages, diaries, fiction. Those are examples of personal writing. And what about job-related writing? You might imagine things like announcements, advertisements, manuals, and many other texts, yeah, that are related to jobs. And then the third type, we have academic writing. What about academic writing? The word academics is actually something that's related to schools or to college or to university, right? So when we're dealing with academic writing, we're dealing with the types of texts that are usually read or written by academics. It can be teachers, it can be students, it can be lecturers, professors, and many other types of jobs in the academic setting. Okay, and that's why you might imagine texts like reports, essays, journal articles, and also theses. Yeah, so we have three types of writing: personal writing, job related writing, academic writing. And when we are designing a writing test, we're going to need to know what kind of genres do we need to assess, what kind of types of writing do we need to assess. Yeah, is it personal writing? Is it job related writing? Or is it academic writing? And once we know the type or the genre of the writing, product that we need to assess, then we're gonna know the format or the pattern of the writing that we will have in our test, right? So yeah, firstly, we're gonna need to decide the type of the writing, and then we need to decide the genre. What is the genre of writing? Yeah, whether it's letters, personal letters, or perhaps, well, actually, we also have job related letters, right? When you write a letter for applying for a job, for example, it's going to be job application letter, right? So, or cover letter, yeah. Cover letter is actually an example of job related writing. So we have personal letter, and we also have job related letter. Yeah, those are two different types of uh, even though they're the same genre, but they have different types of writing. Yeah, one is personal and the other one is job related. But anyway, that is about the genres of writing, the types of writing, yeah, that we're going to assess. Okay, and next one. After we know the genres of writing, after we know the aspects of writing, then we're gonna need to think of the elements as part of the aspects of writing. Yeah. So the next thing after we know the genres, we're gonna need to know about the aspects of writing. What is the aspect of writing that we need to assess? It can be one aspect or more than one aspects. Yeah. So for example, here you might consider several things that are pertinent to writing, like genre, of course. We have discussed about it previously, right, in the previous slide. So we have genre, that is only one aspect of writing. We have many other aspects of writing. We might assess, we might test the clarity of the writing that is produced by our student, for example. So that is the clarity aspect of the writing. And then we might assess the spelling, for example. So the spelling is going to be related to the writing system of the language, right? Because we also use spelling in writing. So yeah, spelling can be another aspect that we can assess in the test. Yeah. So we have genre, clarity, spelling, and you might other aspect like vocabulary. You might need to assess the vocabulary, whether the students use the appropriate vocabulary in their writing or not. And then the next one, you might assess the coherence, the style, the writing style. We have the so-called stylistic in our writing. So different genre of writing will have different style. Yeah. So we might assess the style of the writing. We might assess the grammar perhaps, or the cohesion. We have coherence, we have cohesion. Yeah. Or the argument, the quality of argument presented in the writing of our students. Or perhaps you want to assess about the accuracy. Accuracy is closely related to grammar. Yeah, accuracy is closely related to grammar. And then we have structure. So structure is also part of grammar, by the way. So the structure, or perhaps the synthesis, yeah, the synthesizing skill of our students when writing, or perhaps the punctuation, or probably the organization, or maybe the editing, because in writing, when one is writing, usually he or she will have to edit the writing, right? We have drafting, we have editing and revising, right? And then we have finalizing and so on, proofreading. Yeah, so those are the steps that we usually have in writing. And don't forget that we also have planning at the beginning, or outlining, right? And even before that, you might have brainstorming. When you write, you might need to brainstorm ideas first, right? So there are stages of writing. You may assess those different stages of writing, whether our students can follow those stages of writing well or not. Yeah. And then you might also assess the originality of the writing, because plagiarism is very serious problem that we have, right, in writing. So you might assess originality of the work of your students. And then you might think of the register. Register is also related to grammar. Yeah. So register is about the knowledge of context of the writing. When you're writing a letter, you might think of the the addressee of the letter, about the person who will receive the letter, right? And you might also think of yourself as the writer of the letter, right? So different sender and different recipient of the letter will influence the content of it, right? So that is register. And you might also think about the channel of communication. When you are writing through letters, it might have different format from when you are writing through emails, for example. And it's going to be different from when you are writing via WhatsApp chat, for example. That's going to be different. So that's part of register. And then another aspect might be about reviewing. So that's also part of the stages in writing. We have editing, we have reviewing or proofreading. And we actually also have many other aspects. Yeah. So those are only examples. The ones that you see on the screen are only some examples of aspects in writing that you might assess in your test. Okay. And next, after you know what to assess about the genres of text and then about the aspects of writing itself, then you're gonna need to know about the skills. You might also assess the skills, right? And if you have read the book by Brown entitled Language Assessment, I believe that you can see that there are several micro skills and also macro skills in writing, right? So I believe that all of you already know about it very well. Micro skills are related to the bottom-up processing, right? Where the test takers or the students focus on the small units of language. Like, for example, we can focus on the writing process that includes knowledge about graphemes or orthographic patterns. Yeah. So that's related to the spelling, the letters, or we might focus on our students' ability to write, you know, short stretches of languages like words, phrases, or sentences, right? And then we might focus on the grammatical systems, for example, like tenses, agreement, subject-verb agreement, or pluralization, for example, because nouns have their singular and also plural forms, right? So we might focus on the pluralization of nouns, for example. And then we might focus on the patterns of the grammar that are used uh, in the writing, yeah. Or we might focus on the patterns of the sentences that are used. Sentences that are used in descriptive text might be different from those used in narrative text, for example, because they will have different tenses, they will have um, different word choices, right? So yeah, different genre will have different grammar and different types of sentences, right? And in micro skills, we can also focus on other types of grammatical forms or even cohesive devices, like when we are writing a procedural text or a procedure, usually we will have cohesive devices like first, next, third, after that, and so on. So those are cohesive devices. Yeah? And usually in concluding paragraph, we will have cohesive devices like in conclusion, right? To sum up and so on. So those are cohesive devices and they are part of micro skills. Yeah, they're part of micro skills. Now, what about macro skills? Macro skills deal with top-down processing. Yeah, when we're talking about macro skills, we're talking about top-down processing, and by top-down processing, it means that we are focusing on the big picture of the writing. We focus on the context of the writing. We focus on the organization of the text that the students write, and that's why it makes sense when we're assessing macro skills. When we're assessing macro skills, we're going to be focusing on, for example, rhetorical forms of the writing, or we might focus on the discourse. Discourse means the text itself, from paragraphs to complete text like essay or short story and so on. And then we might focus on the communicative functions. When you are writing a cover letter, it has a different function from, let's say, manual. When you're creating a manual, it's going to be different. It's going to have a different function from cover letter or job application letter, right? So we might focus on the function of the writing, or you might focus on the organization of the text. You might assess your students' ability to write text with good organization that contains, for example, main idea, supporting idea, and so on, right? And then you might also focus on strategies of writing, like, you know, pre-writing. So in the stages of writing, usually we have pre-writing stage, right? And then, for example, paraphrasing, right? Paraphrasing is also another skill that we have in writing. And then revising, editing, and so on. So those are part of macro skills. Yeah. If you have any question, ask, you know, the questions right away. Yeah. And then the next one, after we know about what to assess, we know about the genres of writing, we know about the micro and macro skills, and then we know about the aspects of writing, then we can move on to how to assess, right? After we have determined what to assess, then we can move on to how to assess. So if you know that you need to assess your students' skill in paraphrasing a story, then you need to design the test itself. You need to design, or you need to determine how you will assess the paraphrasing skill of short stories, or of, you know, a story. Then we need to talk about how to assess. Yeah. So when we are dealing with how to assess, the first thing that we need to understand is that we have different types of writing performance. In Brown's book, uh, Language Assessment, yeah, the title of the book is Language Assessment. So if you read the book, you will know that there are different types of writing performance. There are actually 4 types of writing performance, and they are imitative. So imitative, it's from the word imitate. So when we learn to write as a child, for example, or perhaps as a beginner learner of English, when we learn to write, usually we will imitate the system of writing, right? And that includes skills like, writing letters. That includes skills like spelling skill, or perhaps using appropriate punctuations in the writing. That is imitative task of writing. Yeah. So when we ask the students to write a word, or to spell a word in writing, or to use punctuations in the writing, that's when we assess the imitative writing performance. And then what about the next one? After the imitative, we have intensive writing. That's actually the second stage. That's the more advanced stage, the second more advanced stage of writing. That is intensive writing. When we're talking about intensive writing, we're focusing on the grammar. We start to focus on the grammar. So that's when we write words, or phrases, or sentences, and then we focus on the grammar of the words, or the phrases, or the sentences, and that is intensive. Yeah. So that's a bit higher than imitative. And then after intensive, we have responsive. What about responsive? Responsive, it's also a bit higher than intensive. Yeah. So it's a bit more advanced than intensive. So in responsive stage, we usually ask the test takers, or the students, to write paragraphs. As you know, paragraphs is longer than words, or phrases, or sentences, right? So when we write paragraphs, it includes several skills, or several aspects that are usually higher than intensive or imitative kind of performance, right? So that is responsive. We're dealing with paragraph level, or text, or subtext level of, text of writing. And then after responsive, we have extensive. So we have responsive, and then the last one we have extensive. Extensive is actually the ultimate level of writing. So in extensive, the students or the test takers, they are dealing with the end product of writing. What is the end product of writing? If you're writing an application letter, job application letter, or a cover letter, usually the end product would be the letter itself, right? So the letter itself is the end product. If you're writing a narrative, for example, the end product can be in the form of short story. Or if you're talking about longer text, then the end product might be in the form of a novel, for example. So that's the end product. So in extensive writing, we're coming to the end product of the writing. Yeah. Okay. Now, another thing about how to assess, other than the types of performances that we have in writing. So the other thing is the scoring, of course. Yeah. So once we know the stages of writing performance, then we can focus on the scoring, right? So there are three ways of scoring writing performance. Yeah. They are actually the first one, holistic scoring, and then the second one we have analytic scoring, and the last one we have primary trait scoring. You might be familiar with holistic scoring as well as analytic scoring because we have talked about holistic and analytic rubrics, right? So they are actually the same things that we have talked about, yeah, previously. But we have a new one. We have the third new term here. We have primary trait. So I'm gonna review the holistic and also analytic scoring, and I'm gonna introduce you to the third type of scoring for open-ended writing and also speaking actually. Yeah. So now let's get to the holistic scoring first. Holistic scoring, when we assess the writing holistically, when we try to assess our students' writing holistically, usually we will create a holistic rubric, especially when it's open-ended kind of task. Yeah. So we're gonna need to design a holistic rubric. And what is meant by holistic rubric? You can see the example here, everyone, on the screen. So this is the example of holistic rubric. I have told you that when we're designing a holistic rubric, usually we assign a single criteria for the scale, right? So for example, here we have the scale from 0 to 100, and then we assign a single criteria for the scale, right? So for example, for one single score or a range of score, usually we're going to have one single descriptor. We have one single description or descriptor here. There's only one description of the competence, yeah. And then in the other range of score, we also have only one single description, right? And that is holistic. So usually we do not break down the writing competence or the aspects of writing into several components, but we assign them all at once as one whole unit. That is holistic. Yeah. It's usually quicker to score if you have a lot of number of students. Then scoring the works using holistic rubric will take less time for you to score as a teacher. Yeah. So it saves time. It saves more time. That is holistic rubric. It has the strength or the advantage of taking less time to score. Yeah. But of course, we cannot focus on certain element of writing. We cannot focus on one single aspect of writing because we have holistic kind of description. Yeah. What if we want to focus on certain aspects of writing? What if we want to assign different scores to this to different elements of writing? Then you might choose the second type of scoring, and that is analytical scoring. When you are when you are analytically scoring your students' writing, then you need to design an analytical rubric. So you need to design an analytical rubric. From the name, you will know that analytical rubric usually breaks down the components into several criteria. So for example, here we have the scale of 0 to 10, and we have 4 ranges of scores here. And then we have, of course, one uh, criterion, and then we have two criteria, and then 3 criteria here. So we have 3 components or 3 criteria for assessing the writing. We have 3 different components of our assessment. And it means that for a single work, we might assign different scores. For example, we assign 7 for the idea explanation, and then we assign 4 for the coherency, and then we assign 10 for the grammar, for example. So we may assign different scores in analytical scoring. So usually when you're scoring your students' work using analytical rubric, it will take more time. You will need more time as a teacher to give the score to your students. And of course, that's the weakness, right? You will need more time to assign the score to your students. But the strength is that you can assign different scores for different criterion or different component. Yeah. So the students will know which criterion or which component are they weak at. Okay. So that is analytical rubric. And the last one, finally, and this is the new type of scoring or the new type of rubric that you need to know, and that is primary trait. What is primary trait scoring or primary trait rubric? Primary trait. Trait means characteristic, right? Primary trait means primary characteristic, the main characteristic. So it's actually the type of scoring that focuses on the primary function, the primary goal, or the primary characteristic of the writing that the students are producing. For example, here we have this rubric, and you can see from the description, it's actually holistic rubric, right? But this holistic rubric is focusing more on the primary trait. So we may call it as primary trait rubric or holistic primary trait rubric because it focuses on the primary trait or the primary characteristic or the primary function of the text, of the writing text. So if you read the descriptions here, we have the description for a 0 score is fails to persuade the audience, and then or to persuade the readers. Yeah. And then the second one, for the score of 1 here, we have the description of attempts to persuade but does not provide sufficient support. Yeah. And then we have the score of 2 here. The description is presents a somewhat persuasive argument but without consistent development and support. That is the score of 2, right? And then the score of 3 will include this description. Develops a persuasive argument that is well developed and supported. So what kind of text do you think is assessed or is scored by this rubric? What kind of text? What is the genre of writing that is scored using this rubric? Anyone? Writing that persuades somebody. So what is the genre of text or the genre of writing that persuades the readers? So we can use this rubric to score an argumentative essay. So this is an example of primary trait scoring rubric because as you can see from the descriptions, they focus on the primary function of an argumentative essay, right? What is the primary function of an argumentative essay? Well, of course, to persuading an audience. And the audience here is actually readers, because we're talking about writing, right? So yes, this is the primary trait scoring rubric because it focuses on the primary function of the text, of argumentative text, and that is persuading. Yeah, persuading. Okay. Is that clear enough, everyone? Or do you have any questions?